Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's show. Good morning. How are we doing today? On today's show, China plans an up to $200 billion trade deal in concessions, but there is some skepticism about that. Gina Haspel is confirmed. We'll take a look at what her victims think about that. And an Equifax and Facebook lawyer will run the FTC's Bureau of Consumer Protection. Finally, a white student who posed with a rifle on campus lied to Fox News that she was a victim of racism. We'll have that story for you and more. We always like to have a fun story to end the week. But we have right now, to start off today's show, a very fun guest with us, because joining us now is our senior SWN economic analyst and elections co-host. As you know, it is Nicholas Walsh. Nicholas, thank you so much for joining us here today.
It's my pleasure, Spencer.
All right. So I brought you here with us today to react to this news that China, which we are kind of in an economic war with right now, is considering a trade deal that would soothe tensions and clear the way for an historic encounter with Kim Jong-un. What do we need to know about this big blockbuster deal?
I think the important thing to know is that it's just a big blockbuster headline and not a big blockbuster deal, because those take a long time to negotiate, and $200 billion is nice, but it is still 1.8% of the $11.9 trillion Chinese economy. So it's not really going to move the needle for them, but they're trying to help Trump negotiate his way out of his position, that's for sure. But according to all my sources, China cheats on trade. They're going to continue to cheat on trade. So you got to give Trump credit for attacking the problem, but it's way too early to take a victory lap.
So I do want to take a look at briefly that problem, because it's a story that we have discussed, but I don't think we've really kind of driven to the meat of it. And a lot of times Trump has said, China cheats on trade and they're not very good with trade, but for whatever. And some people may not know or really understand what he's talking about there. So when they say he's ripping off American workers, or cheating on trade in some form, what does Trump mean when he says this?
It means that they get around quotas by shipping their goods through other countries. They say that they'll grant access to U.S. companies on similar terms, none of which ever happens. And remember, China got into the World Trade Organization in the Clinton era, so that would be good on 15 years ago. So that would tell you that at that point China was a lot smaller as an economy, so they could rightfully claim protection of their industries, but without continuous readjustment of those numbers, they can no longer claim justification to protect industries in an economy that's no longer developing, if that makes sense.
So it's pretty much they could pretend they're a little bit smaller of an economy than they are at this point.
Well, when the initial terms were negotiated, they were, but there was no elevation in the terms. So elevation in the terms, so a reduction in the amount of protection that they could legally get away with. And so they took advantage of the bureaucracy to basically picture if you were a major league player that could all of a sudden hit on a little league ball field.
I see.
Chances are you do pretty well, right?
Yeah, so it was like kind of like a little league ball player started out playing on a little league ball field, but then
Back
grew
in
up.
the Clinton era, they were developing economy. And they were a little league player.
Yeah, and so now they're playing a big leaguer playing on a little league field.
That's exactly right.
I see. So is it becoming a real problem, or was it something that would be nice to solve but isn't really having a direct effect on the economy?
I think it's having a direct effect on the middle of America in industrial production, no doubt about it. And the real threat, though, I think the golden goose is intellectual property. And so, as you know, every company that wants to do business in China has to basically gift their intellectual property to their new Chinese partner. And that's the only place on earth where that is required. So that it has to be ground number one to get that reversed so people can protect their intellectual property. Other than that, I think trade deal is more of a headline than reality. It's going to be a long slog, but I certainly commend Trump for tackling this.
Yeah, so it is going to be a big step forward for China, no doubt about that. In the relationship between China and America, China would pledge to buy more American goods, including agricultural products like soybeans, as well as semiconductors and natural gas, the New York Times explains. That could theoretically reduce its trade surplus with the United States, which hit $372.5 billion last year, up up to $200 billion, though the real number would most likely be lower, as you said, the slog natural goes out. In return, China is asking the United States to set aside tariffs and investment restrictions it is threatening against Chinese companies. That includes lifting sanctions on the telecommunications giant ZTE, which faced ruin after losing access to American suppliers, relaxing export controls that prevent American companies from selling sensitive technologies to China. So that is pretty much a brief outline there of the terms of the agreement. And, you got to be thinking that the markets here in America will very much like this news.
Well, it's hard to separate the news from the reality of what the trade deal is going to be, but his quest for sanctions that really matter, he sort of lucked into hitting the mother lode on this ZTE sanction. I mean, that really woke up Beijing, I think, how he did that. And the fact that he reversed it is a little odd, but it is really technology that is really the nexus of trade and security. By that I mean, it's one thing about trade, but you really can't have Chinese microchips potentially under the control of foreign powers in sensitive places in America. I think that's the other issue that you really have to consider when you're talking about. It's one thing about a soybean. It's another thing about a microchip.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole nother level of security.
Yeah, so it's also a really big company in itself. And I do remember there was some kind of disturbance or kind of a uproar about that over the weekend when Trump decided to meet with President Xi about it. And you think this could be what motivated them into action?
Well, it's unarguably weird that all of a sudden Trump worries about job losses in China.
Yeah.
So that's a false flag for something else that he's concerned about. And maybe he has a negotiation chess game going on where he threatens to kill ZTE. He practically does. And then he says, I'm the hero for saving him, ZTE. It's sort of like Kim in North Korea saying, I'm the hero for denuclearizing and agreeing to not murder my people.
Uh-huh.
That makes me the hero. But yet he did it in the first place. So it's just a long road, and I hope Trump has the stamina to pull it through, because trade deals definitely should be indexed for the economy. They should be constantly revisited, but there is the other function, which is totally true, that if you want the optimal supply chain, if you're a car manufacturer, you need to know that all of a sudden, if I'm importing transmissions from Mexico, there's not going to be 20% tariff out of the blue.
What do you think should be happening in the Trump administration, and what do you want to see coming forward in relations between China and the United States? What do you think are the next steps to get this trade deal done successfully?
Well, I think I'd like to see some level of intellectual property protections, and me selling in China looking similar to China selling in the U.S.
So just kind of the leveling of the playing field?
That would be the essence of free trade, really. Yeah.
All right. So thank you very much for your insight and looking into that. That's Nicholas Walsh, our senior economic analyst. We will be right back with more news stories. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. We thank you so much for joining us here today. We got a good one for you. Of course, that was Nicholas Walsh. We hope you enjoyed him on today's show. I know I certainly did. Good to have him here with us today. Also, if you get the chance, I do want you to do some things for me. All right. What you got to do is check out For the Win, give us some support. Check out Global. It'll take you back through history. Whether it's big concepts, small, or ones people don't really talk about. We'll take you through everything history, and of course our 2-part final episode is coming this June. Also, anything else? No, I think we're good. All right, that is my favorite music where I like to do promos under, because it is kind of like gun shooting, gun wielding music there. Anyway, yeah, a U.S. Navy Reserve doctor on a Gina Haspel torture victim said some pretty dark things about her. I do want to get to some of those. He's an American doctor and a Naval Reserve officer who have done extended medical evaluation of a high-profile prisoner who was tortured under the supervision of Gina Haspel, privately urged Mark Warner, the vice chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, to oppose Haspel's confirmation as CIA director, according to an email obtained by The Intercept. Here is the email, the text of the email. I've evaluated Mr. Abdal Rahim al-Nashahiri, as well as close to 20 other men who were tortured in U.S. custody, including several who were tortured as part of the CIA's RDI program, which is rendition, detention, and interrogation, which sounds scary in its own way. I'm one of the only health professionals that ever talked about torture, its effects, and his ongoing suffering. Dr. Sandra Crosby, who's a professor of public health at Boston University, wrote to Warner's legislative director on Monday. He is irreversibly damaged by torture that was unusually cruel and designed to break him. Over my over 20 years of experience treating torture victims from around the world, including Syria, Iraq, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mr. al-Nashiri presents as one of the most severely traumatized individuals I have ever seen. So, yeah, really bad stuff here. Torture. We'll get into some of the gory details here in a minute. It is